friends. I am in receipt of a bunch of your questions. A while ago, we asked you to go on to MREA and record your voice asking your questions. Well, I have a backlog of them. Starting on episode 53, which is the official kickoff of season 2, you are going to start to hear your questions, and I'm going to give you my answers. I can't wait. If you want to get your question in, go to MREA and record yours today. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Podcast. I'm Jason Abrams, and this is the place where we lift the curtain on the world of real estate like never before. Every week, I sit down with visionaries, pirates, and mavericks. We're here to document, demonstrate, and most importantly, demystify their game-changing models and systems. What secrets propel them to the top? And how are they living their dreams? This is about passion, it's about strategy, but above all, it's about real, tangible success. So buckle up and let's dive in. This is the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Podcast. You know, I am often emailed, text messaged, phone calls, sent a raven with people that are asking me, Jason, I've been selling a ton of real estate. I want to invest in it. How do I invest in it? And how do I turn my sales business into an investing business? Or how do I take the cash that I make selling homes and go out and buy investment real estate? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Friends, we have a former police officer turned real estate agent turned podcast host turned author. That's right, I'm speaking about none other than David Greene. He is the face of the Bigger Pockets podcast network, as well as wrote the book on BRRRR. That is the model by which you can buy real estate, renovate it, rent it, refinance it, and then repeat the process. We are going to cover it in detail. Friends, sit back, buckle up. This is David Greene. David, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Dude, we have so much to unpack. I mean, your team does, perennial $250 million. You're a giant podcast personality within the real estate industry, and you are a very successful author. And we are going to get into all of these things. But first, I want to talk about how you got here. David, how did you come into the greatest industry of the world?
Man, I fell into this thing backwards. I had no intention, which is funny because we always try to teach people about being intentional. But sometimes you got to wander around in the wilderness until you bump into the place where you belong. And then you get intentional about following models and systems and the people that have come before you. I was a police officer and I worked overtime and I saved money the blue collar way. I literally just worked as much as I could, saved as much as I could. I learned how to be efficient stacking up my overtime shifts. So I learned if I work a swing shift into a graveyard, I need this much time off to sleep, and then I can work 2 shifts the next day. And when I'm on time and a half overtime, when I'm on double time overtime, how I can do this safely. And my mind sort of wired itself around finding patterns in things that worked. I learned if I wanted to make money in law enforcement, I needed to do certain things, and other things needed to be done to do a satisfactory job, but they weren't going to make more money. And then I developed plantar fasciitis and my feet got really bad and I couldn't work in that profession safely.
Well, I want to ask, because it's interesting. You say, I looked for these patterns so that I could make money in being a police officer.
Yeah.
And my guess is very few people go into police work so they can make a lot of money. What was the mission? Like, what drove you into that industry?
I had this burning desire in my heart to do that job. To this day, I couldn't tell you where it came from. The only thing I can explain is I think God was putting that desire in my heart because he knew that I needed that for my own personality. As a kid, I had a rough relationship with my dad. I did not have a lot of confidence. It was very tough. And that job sort of helped me grow from a boy into a man, put me in difficult situations where there was no option but to quit or to change things about me that I needed to change to be able to do the job. And when I came out of it, I was a much more confident person, much more decisive. I liked myself a lot more and I was more valuable to the world and I worked in it. And when I was there, I knew I wanted to provide for a future. I did not like the idea of leaving my financial future in the hands of a pension and hoping it was still there or Social Security.
So looking back on the time you spent as a police officer, what lesson did you bring into the real estate industry that you learned there?
Oh, that's such a good question. A huge thing that I did different than the other police officers is they would tell themselves things like, well, if I'm at work, all I can do is work. Or if I'm writing a report, all I can do is write a report. But I really wanted to be super cop. So if I sat down to write a report and you're saying, hey, I need help with this thing, I wanted to write my report as fast as I could so I could get done and be there to help you. And when I got there, I wanted to be able to quickly recognize what needs to be done to get to the resolution we need as fast as possible, because that next call for help is going to be coming out. And if we're slow at our job, that means people are waiting 6 hours for a cop to be there. And I really think it started with that desire for excellence, so to speak, but it led to recognizing in almost everything you do, there's the 20% that determines the 80% of the results. And being a cop was no different. And I started to notice that, like when I was writing a report, if I had all this information when I sat down, I needed to get the elements of the crime. I needed to get a summary of what happened. I needed to make it clear and concise. And once I figured out in my mind how to write a report with everything I needed and nothing I didn't, I could bang those things out in 20, 25 minutes, where some of my contemporaries might take 2 to 3 hours to do that thing. And so I could get into work and I knew where to go. I was most likely to find the guys with the warrants, and I could make my arrests, and I could get the guy booked in jail. And I knew which deputies in the jail were fast and which ones were slow. And I made sure I went to the fast deputies, and everything was always efficiency and speed. And you had to trim fat at a lot of levels. If I was sitting in the jail waiting for someone to get booked and there's nothing I could do because I'm waiting on those deputies, well, I would start in my mind writing out how my report was going to look. So when I sat down to write it, I had already rehearsed it. Now you take how your brain sort of wires itself around efficiency and you put me in the world of being a real estate agent. Most agents are wildly inefficient. It helped me a ton recognizing let's see, as a real estate agent, maybe you spend a ton of time showing 30, 40, 50 houses to a client. And it's typical that agents will complain about that. Oh, these buyers don't know what they want. But I understood I had a degree of influence over how other people made decisions. So rather than just complaining about it taking a long time, I started experimenting with doing a buyer's presentation, like a listing presentation, but for a buyer, to prep them for what was going to happen. I noticed if I showed them what a home inspection looked like during that initial presentation, it saved me a long time when they were freaking out in escrow when they had to look at that inspection. If that was the first time they've seen one, they don't know how to interpret it. And now they don't know if they can trust what I'm saying, because of course they think I'm only saying that because I want to save the deal. Well, if I show you that before, when there's no skin in the game, you're much more likely to trust me. So I started working all kinds of things into my buyer's presentation. I went over a contract. I went over the earnest money. I went over the appraisal process. I went over the loan process. We talked about the home inspection period. We talked about showing homes and what was out there to see. And I wasn't going to show you the wrong ones. And then I pulled up the MLS and I showed you everything for sale in your price range at the price that you wanted to pay. And people were shocked to realize, oh my God, there's only 8 houses in the whole MLS that really hit everything I want. And I was like, yeah, so seeing 50 of them isn't going to help you. In fact, if you're looking at 50, one of those 8 is going to get bought by someone else that was faster than us. So we need to get to the point that we trim all the fat and we know what we're doing here. And then every transaction, I got a little more efficient as these systems got put in place. So I was able to sell more houses than other realtors because my leads aren't slipping through the crack. I'm not failing to follow up. I had a system of every buyer, I'm going to do the same thing all the time. And I really think that started from being in other high pressure situations like law enforcement.
So you have the plantar fasciitis. You end up needing to make a change. You get into the real estate business and you quickly start to have this success. How does this parlay into real estate investing?
Well, I had been an investor before I was an agent. So I had been buying houses with the money that I had saved from working overtime, just blue collar, white knuckle, old fashioned, save a down payment, keep my expenses low, live beneath my means, put money into real estate. Now, of course, I caught a really nice wind when values went up really quickly when the government printed a lot of money. I did not expect that. But at the same time, I had a lot of buoys in the water because when everybody my age was spending money on vacations and cars and things that depreciate, I was just putting it all into real estate. At the time, cash flow was a lot easier to find, so you kind of had a built-in safety net. So I understood real estate before I ever got a license. I owned 15 houses myself before I represented someone else. And I knew what the fears are like they're going through. I knew what I needed to hear from my agents that made me feel confident. And I knew what freaked me out. So I had a much better understanding of how to relay this. I think my clients felt I had more credibility and trusted me more because I owned real estate myself. I had connections where, hey, we can talk to this person that can help you with X or Y. It is one of the reasons that I think agents should own homes. It's not just because it's a good investment, but it will make you more money in your business because people can tell when you are confidently talking about something and when you're blowing smoke.
Yeah, I think if you want to sell real estate, you should own some of it.
Yeah.
Makes all the sense in the world to me. So you start to go through this maturation and this journey, and you stumble onto this BRRRR method, which although often discussed is very, very easily misunderstood.
Yeah.
And you actually write the book on it. Walk us through how this system works and what the genesis for creating it was.
That's a great question. The genesis was that I just realized if I worked my tail off every hour I could possibly work and saved as much as I could, just eating beans and rice every day, I could still only buy 2 to 3 houses a year. Those down payments of 20, 25%, that's a lot of money when you're buying $300,000, $400,000 homes. Even a cheap house at $150,000, you got to put 30 grand down. You got to be able to save 90 grand a year, maybe 110 if you include closing costs. Who can save that much money? It was unsustainable. And I realized I was running at a dead sprint, working as much as I could, which was unhealthy. And there wasn't an end game. We can all sprint for a period of time. You can't sprint for a career. You have to hit a stride that you can maintain. And so it became abundantly clear, if I want to scale a portfolio, I can't do it this way. And that's when I started looking at like some of my other houses that had appreciated to the point that I could pull money out of them. And I realized I bought this house 4 or 5 years ago. I can now do a cash out refinance because rents have appreciated and the price has appreciated to the point that I can pull the money out safely. I'm not overextending myself. The rents have gone up to cover the new debt service. So my cash flow sort of stays the same, but I end up with 150 grand in the bank.
And I think this is so timely. We unpacked some data around this the other day. And what we saw was that 50% of everybody that had a mortgage had over 50% in equity in the house. You also have a ton of people that own their properties in cash. So when you look up, David, there's an absolute ton of homeowners out there that are sitting on a ton of equity in their houses that ostensibly is sleeping there.
That's exactly right. Now, you want to be responsible. You don't want to just pull out money because you can. In 2005 to 2009, that was a mistake a lot of people made. They had equity in their house. They did not know how to wisely deploy capital. So they would pull it out and buy an RV, buy a boat, buy a jet ski, buy a vacation rental, buy a turnkey product. They were foolish with the way, or maybe they'd pull it out and put an $80,000 renovation into their house where they would redo their backyard. Well, then when property values dropped, everybody let go of the homes, and that $80,000 that they had that put in their backyard went into the hands of some investor that bought a foreclosure. So you don't want to pull out equity just because you can. But if you know how to deploy it wisely, you can pull equity out of the houses that you've bought in the past when they've appreciated. That's assuming you buy in a market where rents appreciate. Also, I have another book coming out where I talk about ways that you can sort of analyze a property to see if that's going to happen. But when I did that, I thought, all right, there's something here. I don't need to save the money to buy the properties. I can take it out of properties I already have. That was the genesis of it. The next step was realizing not only can I wait for a property to appreciate, I can buy a property beneath market value, and I can force equity through doing rehabs. I can make my own equity in a sense if I buy it right and if I rehab it the right way. Now, that's the first 2 steps of BRRRR. It's buy and rehab. And when it clicked in my mind that I could do that, I started intentionally looking for properties that needed work. And because of that, other investors were passing it up. Homeowners didn't want it.
Okay. Tell me exactly how to do that. Because if I'm listening to this, and by the way, friends, you don't have to take the notes. I'm taking the notes. Go to MREAnotes.com. I'm going to have my whole one-pager on this so you can really understand it. And here's the good news. David wrote a whole book on it, which we're going to tell you about in a minute. But if I'm sitting out there and I'm driving 110 miles an hour in my Range Rover on my way to my Alexa Sting appointment, I understand buy it. That makes sense to me. I understand rehab it. That makes sense to me. How do I find the properties, though, David, that are under market value that I can increase the value in?
At the time, I was buying everything off the MLS. Now, I was in California, but I went to markets that had cheaper houses. I went to like Jacksonville, Florida, and Phoenix, Arizona, where the investors there did not have as much capital as I did because my wages were 2 or 3 times higher as what there might have been. So I sort of had an advantage going to a market where I had more leverage than the locals would have. And that was talked about in my book, Long Distance Real Estate Investing, how you find what I call a target-rich environment. It's going to have a lot of properties that you would want. Today, that's harder to do, but it is still possible. I bought a house in Oklahoma a month ago that I paid $227,000 for with an ARV of $400,000. Now, it needs a lot of work. It smells like death. The people that own that house had 4 cats, 5 dogs, rabbits, ferrets, birds. I mean, my realtor wouldn't go in it with me. She's like, look, I've smelled it. You're on your own. Walk through it. I could deal with that better than they could. But you could see why so many home buyers wanted nothing to do with it. Right. So that one I was able to get because I was patient. I made my offer and they went with a higher offer, and that buyer came back to basically negotiate after reports were done. And I was like, well, I'm not going to play games with you. I'll give you an earnest money deposit that's non-refundable, and I'm serious about closing. And so they came back and took my offer at $15,000 less than the other person.
I think this makes sense to me. I should look for target-rich environments that might be outside of my state. And I know we can't unpack that in complete detail, but can you give me the 1 or 2 hacks? If I'm waking up tomorrow and I'm saying, okay, I'm not going to buy in LA where I live, I want to buy somewhere else. What are you looking at?
First thing is, if I'm going to hold it long-term, I need a price to rent ratio that's favorable to me. Gary and Jay talked about the millionaire real estate investor. The 1% rule means that the property would rent for 1% of what you paid for it every single month. That's very hard to find today. But if you can be at 0.7 to 0.8, not a full 1%, you're probably close to where it could still cash flow and it's worth looking into. So you can't go buy anything for $1 million that's going to rent for $5,000 a month. That's 0.5%. It's not enough to sustain cash flow. If you're flipping a house, you don't have to worry about this at all. You're just looking at equity. But if you're going to hold it as a rental, the first thing you need to look at is it going to cash flow afterwards? The next thing that I want to look at is, where do I have less competition? Investors make the mistake of saying, where is everyone else investing? I want to go to where they are. They all flock like locusts to the same market. They throw off the supply and demand equilibrium, and everybody buys in the market. And it does drive prices up high for a short period of time. However, you end up getting outbid by all the people that have more money, better contractors. They can raise money from other people to buy properties, etc. A third thing is, this is a bit of a controversial topic, but if you're not a real estate investor, you probably don't realize that there are basically 2 separate markets for people to sell homes. There is the MLS that we understand, and then there's what I call like the black market, which is where wholesalers are putting properties under contract and they're selling them to the investors, and it never touches the MLS. And if you're not in that space, you probably have no idea how much inventory gets sold through these channels, especially in these lower price markets. I don't think it's good for sellers. I don't think it's good for the market. I would prefer it if everything went through the MLS and you let capitalism do its thing. But there is a ton of properties that are going to wholesalers because people don't like agents. They don't like the reputation agents have developed. They want to save on the commissions, and then they end up getting a bad deal on their house. But if you can get to those sellers before the wholesaler does, you have a very good chance of scooping up that property when other people's eyeballs are not on it.
So this means direct to consumer, and this might mean sending out mail that this is the I buy homes for cash type of mail.
That's it. You can literally look up people's information if you're driving by a house that's got boarded up windows or a yard that hasn't been taken care of. The opportunity that it's in distress is very high. You can make an offer to buy the house, and if they don't like your offer, well, then you can say, then why don't you let me sell it for you? And if you're an agent, you're in a position that you have an advantage a wholesaler doesn't have, because if they can't buy the house, they can't do anything with it. As an agent, you still have an opportunity to sell it, to list it, and get a commission. I think the problem, Jason, is agents are being outworked on the lead generation side by these wholesalers. These wholesalers do not think that their job is to fill out a contract and take a headshot picture and post a Facebook post. Their job is to find a freaking seller, and they go after it hard. And then you got agents on the other side that are kind of playing nice and sweet and waiting for deals to find them. And they're absolutely getting outworked by these wholesalers that are cutthroat.
I love that. All right. So number one, needless to say, we had to generate a lead. We just unpacked that. Then I got to buy the property. Then I got to rehab the property by which to raise its value. What comes next?
Once that's done, you're going to put a tenant in there and you're going to start collecting rent, and then you're going to refinance the property. Now, the whole idea here is that you bought it for less than what it was worth. You added value to it through the rehab. You should have equity. When you refinance, you're pulling money out of the deal based on its new higher value, not the lower value that you paid for it.
It's just that simple. Say it again.
That's it. You're creating equity and then you're converting that equity into money in your bank through a cash out refinance. You do not have capital gains taxes. You do not have closing costs. You do not have commissions. I mean, you do have you do have closing costs on the loan side. You don't have title and escrow fees and those types of things. It is cheaper to pull money out of a deal through a cash out refi than it is to get money out of a deal from selling it.
Once you do that, you just go do the next one.
You've got the capital. Now you can deploy it again. So the reason I like this method is if you're buying a property right and you're also rehabbing it correctly, you're adding equity to your net worth with every step, almost like a snowball grows with every rotation that it hits going down. Now, I will admit this was much easier to do when there was less competition in the real estate space. Everybody at this point, the cat's out of the bag. We've done too good of a job teaching people how to do this. The information's everywhere. There's a ton of competition for these assets. You have to be intentional about going and finding them. You cannot just wait for it to find you. But when you do find that deal, like this Oklahoma deal that I talked about, I'm going to spend about $75,000 to fix that thing up that I paid $227 for, and it's going to be worth $400,000 or so, maybe a little bit more. I basically added $100,000 of equity to my net worth with that one deal.
And that's the thing. You may have more people doing it, and it may be harder to find the deals. All that changes, though, is the number of people you need to talk to. It doesn't change anything else. It just changes the number of people you need to talk to at the top of the funnel to get where you want to be. So let me ask you this. I'm listening to all this. It sounds fantastic, and I'm driving now. I'm in my Tesla, and I'm like, I'm going to do that. Where does this go wrong? Give me the 3 or 4 words of warning and talk to me like you're talking to your kid who's about to go into this thing.
I wrote about in the BRRRR book the 2 ways that's very easy to mess this up. In fact, if you eliminate these 2 ways, you'll almost never have a problem. The first is that you underestimate how much the rehab will cost and how much time it will take.
Man, you say it in one sentence, but like someone who's lived that knows you think you got it right. You're the most surprised when it goes wrong.
Absolutely.
Now, how do you not let that happen?
I mean, part of it is having a contractor that tells you the truth. Just like we as a listing agent know that if I go in there and say, Jason, I'm going to sell your house for $400,000. These are the comps that support it. This is the competition that your house is looking at. These other people are listed at $390. If we do $450 like you want, it's going to sit there and it's not going to sell. I told you the truth. But if some other realtor comes in and says, hey, I can list it at $450, believing it's not going to sell, even if they think it does, knowing that if they lock you into a 6-month contract, they're just going to have a price reduction conversation and drop it to the $400. They lied, but they won. How honest am I when I tell you this? And how well can I communicate why you should listen to me and not somebody else? It's just like that with contractors. They can come in and say, I could do the whole thing for $30,000 and I could get it done in a month. And then it turns into, well, when we opened this wall, we found this thing. Oh, it turns out that the countertops are more than we thought. Oh, my cabinet guy's busy. I need a draw up front. I'll get to it when I can. 4 months later, you're sitting there with a house torn apart, making hard money loan payments on this thing because you went with the cheapest contractor. It always amazes me how agents know that our clients will fudge what they should do and not take our advice. But then we as agents will turn around and we will do the same thing that we complain about our clients doing. You just have to know. You want the person that tells you no. You want the contractor that says, I don't think you should do that. Do this thing instead. That's a big one. The other way that a BRRRR goes wrong is you overestimate your after repair value, how much you think it's going to be worth when the work is done. Some people get these after repair values from the wholesaler they bought it from. Well, that person says it's worth $400 and then they show you all the comps that support that. They don't show you the comps that are at $250. And so you go in thinking pie in the sky, best case scenario, and then you find out it's not. Now, this rarely went wrong when the market was on a rocket ship up. You could really screw that up, but man, the market would bail you out. Over the 2 months of time it was being rehabbed, you might have gained 10% of equity in some markets. Now that the market is not flying up, it's kind of just holding steady in most places. If you get that ARV wrong, you may be stuck with a property that you cannot do a cash out refinance on to get back any money that you borrowed to buy it.
Now, I want to jump in here because this is the key. This is so important. Did you hear what he just said about the ARV? Now, for our friends out there who might not know what ARV means, that means after repair value. You see, the whole model here is based on buying something under market value, then repairing it so that it has a higher value. That's the crux of the entire system. That's what makes this thing go. So there's a few places here where it's absolutely paramount that you win. Number one, you have to win when you buy it. Remember, you make your money when you buy something, not when you sell it. Said differently, you have to buy it right. Then we have Renovate. And he's up to this point where he says you have to have an honest contractor who's going to tell you like it is. But here's the key. You need to know after the repairs are done, after the renovation is finished, what's the value of the property going to be then? That's the ARV. Now, here's what I've seen happen. People fall in love with the projects that they're doing. They fall in love with the granite that they picked. They fall in love with the tile that they selected. They can't believe how great the cabinets look. And before you know it, they are in the home beautification business as opposed to the home investment business. So here's the key. I know what I'm buying and I'm buying it right. I know how much I'm going to spend on the renovation and I'm not going overboard. And then I know exactly what this thing is going to be worth after I renovate it. If you get any of those wrong, you're going to have a problem. Okay, so how do I defend against that?
First thing is, don't look at the comps that tell you what you want to hear. Look at all the comps. Be as objective as you can. If you're a realtor, you have access to the MLS, that benefits you because you can look at all the houses in the neighborhood and you can see where they are. For me, when I was taking listings myself, I would make a CMA and I would want to see you got actives and pendings and sold. That tells you such a great story about what to expect. If I see a small number of properties actively for sale, a big number pending, and a big number sold, that's a healthy market for a seller. I am willing to push on what we can get for your house if that's what I'm seeing. It looks like a pyramid. Bunch of solds, lots of pendings, and then a small number for sale. If that pyramid inverts and you're looking at 15 houses active, 3 pending, and not a lot sold, your seller is in for a rough time. You are in a competition with those other 15 properties. When you're the person who's doing the BRRRR, you're the buyer in this case, or the seller, you're going to become a seller. You need to understand that if you think that there are houses that have previously sold for 400, but there's a bunch of houses that are on the market for sale, those sale prices are going to be ticking down because there's too much supply for the buyers that are out there. So look at the low priced comps. Look at the houses that sold for the least and know that's probably where the appraiser's eyes are going to be, and run your numbers off of that conservative amount.
So good. It's so good, man. So when you look up at the market right now, where do you see great opportunities? Because the opportunity changes with the market. You're saying BRRRR's harder to do now, but here's the good news. Rates are coming down. So this may be the hottest story 6 months from now waiting to be told.
Yeah.
Where else are you seeing opportunity?
Well, one of the things that I've learned to look at differently is getting out of that immediate gratification of putting $100,000 of equity to your net worth in the first month. I think as we are seeing what the monetary policy of the government has been, where they have just continued to print money. Now we have all this crazy inflation, which on my podcast, man, I was talking about that during COVID. Guys, they are printing so much money. Everything's going to be expensive. You have to invest your money in an asset that's protected by inflation. When you take that 5-10 year approach, and you're not like, I need cash flow right now so I can quit my job. I don't like being an agent. How many properties do I have to buy so I don't have to work anymore? It puts pressure on you to make decisions that aren't always lucrative in the long run. But if you go to markets where you have constricted supply and increasing demand, like let's look at Austin, Texas in the last 5 to 6 years. You can only build so many houses out that way, especially if you're like inside the city, inside the river that you guys have there. And you see all these people moving into Austin. Businesses are moving there. The kind of businesses that move there pay more, so wages are going up, and there's only so much room that you can build more houses. It's almost guaranteed prices and rents have to go up. So if you can get a deal, especially if it's a little under market value and you can fix it up, it doesn't have to be the deal of the century if you got 5 years to wait to see it go up. Now let's juxtapose that with some Midwest market where they've got land everywhere. The jobs that are going there, maybe like, I don't know, Topeka, Kansas. I'm just pulling that off the top of my head. I don't think about a lot of tech companies moving into Topeka. I'm picturing a Goodyear tire plant. You know, like it's a wonderful place, but they're not going to see an explosion in wealth that moves in there. It becomes more important that you get that thing beneath market value. It becomes more important that there's some value add. You can add square footage, you can make it prettier, whatever the case would be. And if that's where you're going to be investing in, You've got to find the people in Topeka that get these deals before they go to the MLS. Or you have to find the actual sellers before the wholesalers find them and before your local agent that puts a billboard up that says, I'll buy your house guaranteed for blah, blah, blah. And if I can't, I'll sell it or whatever the case would be. You have to make the effort.
Makes all the sense to me. You were the face of the Bigger Pockets brand for so long, and that podcast was astronomical in what it did. Looking back on that, and I want to talk about your new podcast in a second, but looking back on that, what are the one or two things you learned from doing thousands of shows and talking to so many people?
I've learned that the audience will often be attracted to the overnight success story. Most people, when they're like, I'm serious about money, I want to know what to do to be wealthy, they wait until they're in a lot of pain. Like, I don't think people with really good health are spending a lot of time reading books about nutrition and diet and health and fitness. It's usually the doctor gave me bad news. My blood work was horrible. I'm going to die soon. Now I need to learn about health, right? Wealth is very similar. You hate your job. Your girlfriend broke up with you. You're back on the dating market and the girls only want to date rich guys. And so you start asking the question, like, how do I get money, right? The problem with that is, just like fitness doesn't happen in a month, good health and fitness is about a healthy diet and exercise regime and making it a part of your life. Wealth respects the same principles. Very few agents just become the top producer in their market in their first 10 months of being there. It takes time to build a database. It takes time to nurture a database. It takes time to build your confidence, having conversations and put systems together. People got to hear your voice and your name a lot before they start calling you. You're going to be out there hunting. I learned on the podcast the successful investors we interviewed were not overnight sensations. They bought a house a year for the first 6 years, 7 years. Then they bought a couple more in their 8th year. And by their 11th year, they're like, yeah, now we're buying 4 to 5 houses a month. They made their mistakes small. I messed up on this contractor on a $30,000 job. I learned a lesson, not on a $200,000 job. And when they had the right contractor, the right knowledge base, they understood what they were looking for. They had a vision of what to look for in a deal. That's when they ramped up. And that is the truth of how like business and money works. It is a long-term game. You are planting a tree that's going to produce fruit for you year after year after year, just like a good database will do as a real estate agent. Investing is the same way. So don't fall for that trapping of, hey, I've got a lead source that's going to get you a whole bunch of houses in contract in the first month. You're always being sold something when you hear that.
Last week, you were in the top 10 podcasts in all of business and investing. So congratulations. How can the people get more of you? What's the new show? Where can they find you?
Thank you. I made it easy to find. It's called The David Greene Show. So if you can remember my name, you can find the show. We also call it Real Talk Real Estate. And it's a podcast about real estate investing, but also I talk a lot about the real estate business. So the vision for this was to build a show that if you were interested in what it was like to work in real estate, or if you did, if you're a real estate agent who works with investors or wants to work with investors, or an investor that always wondered what agents do, I kind of pull back the curtain and share. These are stories of some of the clients that we had. These are what actually goes on behind the scenes in my own deals. Here's the things that go wrong that other podcasts don't want to talk about. So this show is designed to allow me to be able to say, hey, here's all the stuff that goes wrong. This is the way the contractor screwed me over. This is what you want to make sure you avoid when you put in cabinets because this went down. And here's what real estate agents or loan officers or people who work in the space servicing those that are buying or selling houses can know to do a better job for their clients. I mean, I think you might agree with me. We probably have more real estate agents in the space than the market needs. It's a very low barrier to entry to get your license and get into this space. And so what that means is the vast majority of people that work in it, they're probably not getting good training from a broker. Brokers have been in a race to the bottom with offering the lowest commission they can possibly get. Now they're offering all these perks like stock options, or I talked to one the other day that's offering free car washes for their agents. Just whatever you can do to get an agent to be like, yeah, okay, I'll go over there. Well, that comes at the expense of good training, right? And we're shooting ourselves in the foot when we don't give good training to the agents, and then they go out there and they give the reputation a bad name, which is why the people are going to the wholesalers in the first place. So I'm just trying to figure out how we can get agents what they need to restore that reputation.
Welcome to the party. You will not find any of those issues with this audience. These are the mega agents, and they're into models. We don't let anyone escape without giving us a model that actually works based on best practice. All right, David, we want to invite you to the lightning round. We're going to ask you a series of questions. They're going to come quickly. Will you play?
Absolutely.
Favorite color?
Black.
Favorite food?
Quesadillas.
Flip or long-term hold?
Long-term hold.
Cardio or weights?
Weights.
Weights 7 a.m. or 7 p.m.?
7 p.m.
Favorite vacation spot?
Cabo San Lucas at Pueblo Bonito. Love that place.
One book, doesn't have to be new, that you think everyone within the sound of your voice should read.
Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff, especially if you're in sales.
Favorite podcast other than your own or this show?
Oh, I really like the Patrick Bet-David podcast.
Favorite movie?
Gladiator.
Favorite sound?
Favorite sound? A toddler's laugh.
There it is, friends. You heard it here. David Greene, The BRRRR Method. David, where can they get the book?
You can find the book on Amazon. You can find it at biggerpockets.com. I also wrote 3 books to help agents with sales. When I looked at what agents have available, it's either from Keller Williams Publishing or it's hot garbage. It was very hard to find good stuff. So I wrote 3 books for agents also.
It's awesome. David, thank you for everything you're doing, and thank you for sharing so unabashedly with the entire industry. We, sir, are in your debt.
Thank you, Jason.
He just gets it. He just gets it at a level that you only obtain when you have your boots in the mud. When you're the one that's going to these different markets and looking at the real estate. When you're the one that has went through all of the education, pain, and glory that comes with renovating properties, that comes with renting properties, that comes with owning properties, that comes through refinancing properties. That's why he talks about the BRRRR method the way that he does. He talks about it like Jedi because he has went through the training to become Jedi. Here's my word of warning. Please, please, please do not go out and try this at scale until you have went one property at a time and force profit out of each one that you do. Remember, we force profit through the decisions we make and how operationally excellent our execution is. That's the key. So when he talks about buying it, when he talks about renovating it, when he talks about renting it, when he talks about refinancing it, the last one is repeat. Only then do you earn the right to go do it again. Here's what I'm going to tell you. There's more to this concept than we covered in this show. If you're going to go out and you're going to BRRRR method, go get his book on Amazon and study it deeply. Gary tells me that very few people spend enough time on the front end understanding the model behind the things that they're going to go do, and they just skip the learning and they go to the doing. I'm not suggesting you get paralysis and stuck learning. What I am suggesting, though, is this is a great model. Now go study it deeply, then go invest your money and your time. Go forth and do likewise. There it is. That wraps another episode. Friends, I don't know what you're taking out of this. I really don't. I'll tell you what I want you to be taking out of it, which is these are the people that are having tremendously big lives. And the reason it's happening is because they're setting up the models and systems to do just that. Gary Keller told me that leadership is teaching people how to think so that they do the things they need to do when they need to do them, so that ultimately they get the things they want when they want to have them. And that's what I want for you. You're all leaders, but it begins with leading ourselves. If you're enjoying this podcast, I want you to click the subscribe button anywhere that you get your podcasts. We want to be the voice in your head every single week. And every week we're dropping new content. We also send out a newsletter at the conclusion of every show to make sure that you get the highest points in the models and systems that were discussed. So if you want to sign up, I need your name and your email address. Head over to the millionaireagentpodcast.com. millionaireagentpodcast.com. Enter your name and your email address, and every week that newsletter will be in your box. Friends, you just went on a journey. I hope that what happens between now and the next time we meet is absolutely wonderful for you. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions of the guest represent those of the guest and not KWRI and its affiliates, and should not be construed as financial, economic, legal, tax, or other advice. This podcast is provided without any warranty or guarantee of its accuracy, completeness, timeliness, or results from using the information. Warning. You must comply with the TCPA and any other federal, state, or local laws, including for B2B calls and texts. Never call or text a number on any do not call list, and do not use an autodialer or artificial voice or pre-recorded messages without proper consent. Contact your attorney to ensure your compliance.